Sean Lindsay of Channel 9 Perth. Sean, very good afternoon to you.
Yuri, good afternoon to you, gents. And hold on to your horses. This deal isn't completely true. It hasn't been kicked off by the AFL. We expect it to go through tomorrow morning officially, but it is. I went into today thinking it'd probably be a holding pattern kind of day. There'd be a lot of negotiations and things, but it seems like these clubs have obviously been speaking to one another, negotiating in the background for the last week or two, because this has come very quickly, and this is not a simple trade. It's about 1,000 picks. You need to get the advocates out to try and figure out how this one works. But most importantly for West Coast Eagles fans, they will receive that Brandon Starcevich player, who is a dual premiership player, a backman. He's tough. He'll probably spend some time up around the ball as well for the Eagles, and it looks like they will land him. And all the news yesterday was it was going to be tough because the Eagles didn't want to give up pick 16. They wanted a late first round, that extra pick they got from the AFL that will land about 21-22. Everyone thought, or the Eagles fraternity thought, that was fair for Brandon Starcevich. It turns out West Coast have given up their pick 16, but just hold on to your hat before you get too upset, Eagles fans. They will receive pick 12 as well.
Wow.
So that's the highlight. Brandon Starcevich and pick 12 going to West Coast gives them a really handy draft hand. And would you believe it? But the other club, the third party to get this deal done, unlikely bedfellow, was Fremantle, who they've got involved. They've given up their pick 12 that goes to West Coast, and then a whole bunch of other picks as well to get this merry-go-round of picks across the line. So if you're sitting there from a Fremantle's point of view, they've given up their pick 12, pick 33, and then a couple later picks. They will get pick 19 and pick 23 in return. So they've traded for two picks, late first-round picks, as it turns out, for the pick 12, which is good because that's about right for Judd McVie, and that should happen in the next 24 hours as well. So a lot of people complain that a whole bunch of nothing happens in the first week of trade, and they leave it all to the last minute, and they say, what are these list managers and heads of footy, what are they doing? But I tell you what, Freo, West Coast and Brisbane, they've got their ducks aligned, and it looks like this will all go ahead. On the Brisbane side of things, they do lose Starcevich. They also lose pick 19, but they do get pick 16 and pick 22 as well. And if you want me to go through with great detail what the other picks are, I can. But as I said, it gets a little bit complicated. And as they're ironing out the details, that's why I mentioned that this needs to be picked up by the AFL House, which we're expecting will happen late today, but more likely tomorrow. Then if that's the case, and there could be even more picks involved. But I think Eagles fans will be, Starcevich and pick 12, they'll be happy. Freo lose their first-round pick, but get a late first-round pick, plus that 23, which they'll get for Judd McVie, so they should be relatively happy. And Brisbane get pick 16 and pick 22 and lose Starcevich and 19. So it looks like the Eagles are the big winners here, but look, it all depends on who those picks are going to be used for in the draft and who they've got eyeing off. But at the moment, it looks like it's all hunky-dory for all parties. Yeah,
it sounds like everyone should be pretty happy with that, and you've done a good job of highlighting the best takeaways from each team. I'm not confused, Sean. You've done it well.
I've got a headache.
Yeah.
I've got a headache just talking about it.
Understandable. A lot of the people out there in the AFL world would feel the exact same way. The only part I have question marks over, and Sean, if you have more information on this, I'd love to know about it, but the Brandon Starcevich deal for the Eagles, what happens if he, and hopefully this doesn't happen because we want to see the best players out there at all times and all players succeeding in their careers, but what happens if he unfortunately goes down the same route as a Jeremy McGovern and is clinically retired from AFL footy beforehand? Is that contract torn up?
Well, it's a serious risk, but the contract isn't torn up. It depends if they write in the clauses, but at a basic level, let's say it's a 3-year contract. If you do fall or fail to play because of concussion, if you do get retired, then that first year is 90%. The club doesn't have to pay that contract. Next year is 50%, then it's 25%. So the Eagles do have some insurance there if he does go down. Apparently, that knock in the grand final didn't have that ramification on his head.
Okay.
And that is okay. So, you like to think that
no knocks,
he can play,
yeah.
and the player's going to say that he's going to play. I heard that he was going to get paid $900,000 at the Eagles, which, I mean, he's a very good player. He's a backman who can run off and he's hard and knock down. Is he worth $900,000? I'm not exactly sure. I think you'd want to try and save some cash for some of those other younger players around the ball, or even trying to attract some other players. But that is a question that I think a lot of people will have. I'd run the gauntlet with him. I think he's a pretty crafty player, and one of those real culture players as well, from what we hear. So I think he's well and truly worth it. And then the other news that's just breaking, Gents, is it looks like David Swallow, who had a long and storied career at the Gold Coast and had that magical moment against the Dockers, he might come out of retirement. It looks like he is willing to continue his AFL career, and lo and behold, he wants to return home to West Australia. He's pretty well suited for the Eagles, I suppose. Could you see someone like that, a 34, 35-year-old, when he goes into next year, playing in the midfield for the Eagles? So I'm not sure if that's exactly what they need, but maybe a little bit of experience on the ball could help.
Sean, Jacob Lansbury here. We look on this side of the fence and we go, he had the perfect finish, didn't he? He kicked the winning score in their first ever finals win. He got to come back in for the finals after being, an inaugural son, their first draft pick. We thought that was a great way to finish, literally head off into the sunset. And now he's decided to come back. Are we just looking at it too romantically? Would he actually have something to offer?
Look, if you're asking me, and I don't follow the Gold Coast that closely, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, what you could imagine is a situation where he takes a development role as well, so he's coaching as well as playing. Maybe he's helping out more at the waffle level with the Eagles side, who, let's face it, have been spanked since their inception into the competition. So he could add value that way in trying to teach these young players coming through. It just sort of depends on the contracts. And I mean, I like the idea of Tom Mitchell, who's been asked to look elsewhere from Collingwood. I like the idea of a player like that who was grounded in Perth as a youngster, played for Hale, and I think collected 50 touches for Sydney at one stage and collected 40 touches for Hale as a teenager. I thought some of that might be a bit more value if the Eagles were going to go down that path with some midfield depth. It all depends on the contract. If you can get nothing for Swallow, if you can pick him up in one of those 4 rookie spots as a play-on player, which they'll be eyeing off, which they got for free from the AFL, then maybe he's got some worth. It's just trying to find the balance of that list and what value he can provide the midfield, because that midfield, they're sort of short 2 or 3 players, aren't they? You've got Reid there, Hewitt's been okay. If you play Baker in there more often than not, the Starfish go through there, it's still short 2 or 3 players, so a bit of depth wouldn't hurt the Bolter and his men.
So Liam Reedy was the first trade of the day, Sean. The ex-Dockers ruckman, played just the 3 games. He's off to Carlton. Now, Fremantle, they still have Darcy and Jackson, and that's noted, and they played together for most of the year. But do they have any depth underneath? Would they be looking to bring in another ruckman, or do they go to the draft for that?
They've got Riddle, Matt Riddle, who's been plying his trades. Obviously, for Paul Riddle, he's been behind Reedy, who's been behind Darcy, who's been behind Jackson. So they might try to look for another ruckman. I think generally the way I think in the future, and we had this conversation, I don't think it has much point. I don't think there's much point in drafting a ruckman too high. It takes so long to develop these players. And for the Dockers, if they need a ruckman, they'll need it quick. So you're looking more at your mature ages, possibly your rookie draft sort of players, maybe even your mid-season draft for those ruckmen. I don't think the Dockers will be that fussed, because they do have those 2 players. They do go down, they do have some cover, but in terms of development, Riddle's a long way off it, and Reedy was doing very well. I mean, he won the Peel Best and Fairest this year. He's going to be a really good player for Carlton. I think he'll really make waves against Kitten there. So the Dockers will be trying to find a ruckman elsewhere. I mean, I look at someone like Eastman from Claremont, who they were eyeing off for the mid-season draft. He's a very good player for Claremont and took them almost to a prelim. But I do need to start thinking of looking for someone, as I said, I wouldn't expect to be in the national draft. Potentially as a rookie elsewhere would be the way to go.
Looking at some of the big blockbuster trades of this trade period and what could happen, the Zach Butters stuff is making me pretty nervous as a Port Adelaide fan. Sean, what's the latest?
Gone, mate.
Oh, he's gone, isn't he?
No Hinkley, no Butters, they reckon.
He's taken us out of his bio. Port Adelaide Football Club, gone from the Instagram bio. He looks like he's enjoying his time in Victoria at the moment. I think he's sold his house in Adelaide and moved in with Mitch Georgiades.
You know more than me. Yeah, I think that would be. I think Butters will stay. I mean, next year will be very interesting. I don't think he'll go. I mean, Merritt's gone. He has lit a huge fire underneath that club, and I don't think the club have held it. They've stoked it, and the whole place is burning up. I feel so bad for all the Essendon supporters out there. They've got this final drought, and then this outstanding captain of theirs who's pushing Dick Reynolds for the most best and fairest ever for the club. It's just getting very messy, and I find it unbelievable that they haven't just pulled the ripcord and just said, look, he's meeting up with coaches. Let's facilitate a trade. Let's get 3 or 4 picks. It doesn't have to necessarily be all this year. Let's get some picks for next year. Put it back in Hawthorn. You make it happen. We want 4 first-rounders this year and next. Make it happen. Get rid of them and start again. Let's face it, they're rebuilding. They're not going to get to a final with this current list. They need some serious injection of talent. So, I mean, that's the big trade. And then it's just whether Charlie Curnow and Ron Martin can get to my blokes, the Cats. The Cats have nothing. They've literally got an oily rag and that's it. But somehow there's whispers that the Cats will find a way to get it done. So it'll be interesting whether Curnow leaves Carlton or goes to Sydney or Geelong. I'm praying that he ends up in the hoops next year.
Interesting. Yeah, lots of play movement's been touted. I guess we wonder how many of these deals get done because I mentioned this to Seb, Sean, off the top. We've unlocked the whole players under contract can't be traded anymore. So once upon a time, if you were contracted, you stayed at your club. Now, though, a few players have said in contract they want to be traded, and it's a free-for-all. So for us media folk, it's like hitting the gold mine.
Yeah, and I think the clubs are starting to get some agency back as well. So they're starting to say, no, we're holding the players to contract. You think back to yesteryear when Tim Kelly was held to that contract in Geelong and stayed for another year, and that worked out okay. On the flip side, you think about Clary Oliver. Last year, Geelong were trying to price him out of Melbourne. Melbourne stood their ground, and that looks even worse now because they would have got a lot more from Geelong last year than they're going to get this year, as basically he's been shunted out the door. So, But you're right, it's an annoying time of year because you get all these leaks from the player managers. That is just posturing, really. Some of them go through, some of them don't. It is anyone's sort of guesswork. I mean, I didn't think the Starcevic deal would get done until quite late because of that sort of. Well, I didn't think there was going to be a third party in Fremantle in the first instance. I didn't think the Eagles were prepared to give up pick 16. I didn't know pick 12 would be in the mix there. But more importantly as well for the Eagles, that should unlock Oscar Allen. I expect that deal to get done probably tomorrow, if not the day later. And then that compo will come back to the Eagles, which will come back at pick 2. But you're right, you do allude to it's a difficult time of year, and the players who for the last 3 or 4 years have had so much power when it comes to their future. I think some of the teams are starting to wrestle that back because you can see players going back to their clubs after trying to get out and still performing.
And we've seen that with Clayton Oliver as well, who's met with GWS today. It sounds as though he's going to request a trade there. And the flow-on effect from that is the Sam Edward reporting and saying tonight he's surprised he might have even been shocked at the rate of change at Melbourne since he signed that deal. So is there conjecture around Cozzy staying until the end of his contract, which is literally nearly a decade away from expiring, 2034. So the Oliver news up to GWS with still a meeting to come from Collingwood. It sounds as though that's going to happen. And another good example, as you touched on there, Sean, of players being held to their contracts and they're not quite paying out for the club as well in the end because he was worth a lot more at the end of last year.
Well, what are clubs doing? I mean, it just seems like they're offering these huge contracts and then trying and getting to a stage where they don't want the player and trying to weasel out of them a little bit. I mean, Melbourne just don't want to have that sort of player on that money on their books, so they're just trying anything to get rid of him. It's a lesson, and the contracts tend to be getting longer and longer, and the main winners here are the player managers. Make no mistake about it. This is their time of year to make their dosh, and they've been doing a really good job of that. It is very interesting with the Cosby Pickett, because you sign on that big deal and then you lose Petrarca, you lose Oliver, and Petrarca's that's going to take a bit of work to do, and it might not even get done. So I'm pretty sure Stephen King was in his planning. Petrarca was in Stephen King's planning, but if Petrarca and Oliver do go, then Pickett, what was he sold when he signed on mid-year? I don't think he would have been sold that team with two of those outstanding midfielders. But I think it's just a lesson. It'd be interesting to see in the future if the AFL do put limits on contracts to, in terms of length as well, because what you alluded to when you mentioned Starcevic and the issue of concussion, I mean, you can't have a player on a 10-year contract and then breaking down in year 3 or year 4, then having clubs outlaying all this money. So I think in the future the AFL will have to clamp down on that and maybe put in some restrictions on contract length.
Sean, we've already and expect this mega trade that you started with to be ticked off tomorrow, but there's still a few other pieces that need to fall into place. The Eagles are particularly active. Tyler Young from Richmond requested a trade last week to the Eagles to link up with Andrew McQualter and Liam Baker and Jack Graham, all part of the Richmond group a couple of years ago. How does that deal get done? Is that going to be straightforward?
I think it'll be pretty straightforward. I think it'll just be, now that the Eagles have got these picks coming in, I think there's more likely there's a bit more versatility in those picks. I don't think Tyler Williams, what would you say he's worth? I mean, that's the question, because for the Tigers he's worth a lot more than what the Eagles will say. That pick 33 that the Eagles have probably is a bit too high. Maybe it is sort of a 3rd or 4th round pick, but I suspect he wants to go. I think that they couldn't make him sign on. He's out of contract, so I suspect that should be simple. Generally, when the player wants to go and pick the club and they're out of contract, usually it happens. So I suspect that happens, and that'll be a boost to Mitch Duncan's new defensive line as he takes the reins over at the Eagles. And another coaching move as well, Chris Main returning to the Purple, and so he'll join as a development forwards coach, whatever that means, working under Jamie Graham, I suppose, with the Dockers. So that's good news for the Dockers faithful, who will like seeing somewhat of a cult hero back at Coburn.
Sean, much appreciate your time here on Tuesday Drive. You've done a great wrap-up of the trade period thus far, although it hasn't exactly been a bumper, but expecting big news over the next week and a bit as we head towards that deadline day of next Wednesday. All the best with your report tonight. What are you reporting on tonight there at Channel 9?
I'm reporting on the Wildcats, actually.
Oh, Jaron, really? Did you head to that press conference today?
I did go see Jaron Riley. That was good. Son of a gun. Apparently, what he and his dad talked about around the dinner table is basketball. So that's breaking news. It does. I'll give you a hint. It won't lead the broadcast.
Okay. They don't give much, the Rillies, do they?
Nah, no, they don't. It'd be a fascinating. Would love to be a fly on the wall watching this dinner.
It would be an interesting dinner, that's for sure. Sean, appreciate your time again.
Thank you.